On the Africa room, no seed biting, never bites. Fast with the women in the girls down with the guys. Spin not see black, you right, fight. Omen G, Mac 4, Robin C, Gallon Neck Night. Hot stove talk, Robin C, bringing the hype. EC's alive, plus trust under those in my city life. Right? Queens got the dreams united. On the rag, try vibe, bring me stack. Night and under that chocolate flag. Smack that home out the park. Fuck a deafening black. Side game time, Robin CP, time to ignite. Under NYC skies, we fight the good fight. Remains cheer in the orange, we unite. Match forever. I'm 50 in sight. Match riding high. Energy like a live wire. Queen City chance. Passion never tires. Grand slam dreams and paces focus fast. Holding it steady, cause we know we gonna last. We the kings of the field, time to ignite. Under NYC skies, we fight the good fight. Remain cheer in the orange, we unite. Match forever. I'm 50 in sight. All hearts ignite like NYC stars. Robin CP, guiding even through scars. Queens got the glow, city anthem flows.
What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to another Mets Hot Stove Live. It's your boy CP with my co-host Rob. Hopefully I did the intro right. What's up, Mets fans? That was Rob's intro right there. Mine's a salute to everybody in the chat. We appreciate you all being here right now with us. We got 148 people in the chat talking or wanting to talk about Mets baseball. We got a lot to talk about. There's a big elephant in the room as it pertains to this hot stove and these MLB winter meetings. One pitcher is off the board via trade, but you know what? We have to start this stream talking about Juan Soto officially being introduced as a New York Met. He has officially passed his physical, and a contract stipulation that was actually reported by Mark Feinsand is that he must be wearing number 22. So Mets fans, don't expect any change. Again, whether Brett Beatty is here on this team or not, he is wearing 22. What up, Rob? How are you?
I'm good. I know there was some Met fans getting worried that he would fail the physical, a little bit of a la Carlos Correa, as it was taking a little longer and people were getting worried about it. But you know what? When you sign a player like this and you just start the winter meetings, a lot of things have to happen. Everybody has to get back to New York. Everything's got to get prepared and all that stuff. So it's official. So it seems like Thursday will be his, the press conference for him to wear that beautiful Mets white and blue pinstripe, ready to go, wearing number 22. So if anybody was expecting another number, I don't think it was going to happen. They were going to figure it out. And you know what? They bought all those Beatty jerseys, so we're okay, guys. That's a stipulation for the CBA. That is a weird stipulation in the CBA. So if you have a Beatty jersey, it's now a Juan Soto jersey. So let's go. It's official. Now we got to get pitching.
Yeah, get that duct tape ready and just put Soto on the back of it is what my recommendation is. But listen, I got my jersey on pre-order right now. I know Rob does as well. I ended up going because I couldn't find the road grays. I couldn't find it anywhere on the site, so I just went with the pinstripes as well for the New York Mets, the home jersey. Again, such a clean look. And so that is, to get it here by Christmas, I think MLBshop.com was like charging $25 shipping. And I was just like, no, thank you. So, listen, this is, was going to happen. No worries about that from our end. I know that a lot of Mets fans or some Mets fans on X were worried about this being held up by a failed physical or something of that nature. Listen, guess what? This is not Correa 2.0. This is Juan Soto, and he is going to be a New York Met for a very long time. Okay, now to the part of this stream that we all are wanting to talk about. I'm sure everybody in the chat, and by the way, salute to everybody in the chat, whether you're in Rob's chat or my chat, please do hit the thumbs up button for us. Subscribe to both of our channels. If you're subscribed to one channel and not the other, make sure you go ahead to the other channel, hit the thumbs up and subscribe. We thoroughly appreciate it. Again, we do these streams together. We are co-hosts, but outside of that, we do have videos and everything else on our channels that are individual. So again, get the best of both worlds. You know that Rob and I don't agree all the time, and we are here to have debates, so you get both perspectives too. So listen, there's one thing that went down today that headlined today's MLB winter meetings, and it progressed very quickly, and that is that Garrett Crochet is heading to the Boston Red Sox in a blockbuster deal that exchanges 4 prospects, Boston's number 4, number 5, number 11, and number 14th ranked organizational prospects in return for Garrett Crochet. They are heading to the south side of Chicago. And I posted a video on my channel an hour and a half before this trade went down. And there was one MLB executive that went on an interview and stated that their team, it was a mystery team, we don't know who it was out on the Garrett Crochet sweepstakes because they were asking for 3 top 10 prospects. Now, it ended up that they didn't really give up 3 top 10 prospects, the Boston Red Sox, right? Because, 11, 14 to end that deal. But why these are in green, number 4 and 5, is that number 4, Teal, is the number 25 ranked prospect in the MLB 100 pipeline, and the number 5 prospect, Montgomery, is ranked, I think, somewhere in the 50s, just 2 spots behind Jet Williams. So again, this is a haul, an absolute haul for the Chicago White Sox. And quite simply, if the Mets were even going to consider offering a deal of similar value, it would have been 100% Sproat and Jet Williams headlining this deal to even keep pace with what the Boston Red Sox gave up. And again, that's how deep this Boston Red Sox farm system is. Number 4, number 5 is equivalent to the New York Mets number 1 and number 2 or 3, give or take. So what do you think on this deal, Rob? Again, David Stearns took to the media, said that they were in constant communication with the White Sox about trying to get a deal done, but simply does not know and did not know where they stood at the time of this trade to Boston being official. What is your initial reactions here? Because I know you were a hard man at work today and you just got back from work and now you're here with us. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm upset, but I understand why the Mets didn't do it, right? I completely understand that, right? I get that. But we talked about this, right? Before Fried signed, we were hoping the Red Sox got free because we had a better farm system than the Yankees. You would have thought the Yankees was the other team in on Crochet, and if the Red Sox would have signed free, they probably would have been on Crochet, and the Mets probably had a better shot of probably giving. Probably still had to give up Jet Williams, maybe, still two top 10, maybe 2 top 10, 1 top 15, and try to get it done. When you're looking at this, right, you're like, all right, 4 top 15 prospects. Look, I still might have pushed it a little bit because, again, last time I checked, Sproat isn't Roger Clemens as of yet, or isn't, isn't Tom Seaver yet, so I would have still done it because you got to start doing it, right? Fried's off the board, right? Now Crochet's off the board, Snell's off the board, right? Who's left, right? We got the possibility of Luis Castillo, that we still don't know is on the trade block. He could be, he won't be, he might not be. And now Burnes is the guy. And the reports on the Mets aren't in on him. I still find that hard to believe. And Chris, we talked about this.
Yep, me too.
I don't believe it for a second that the Mets are not in on Corbin Burnes. It just doesn't make sense to me that they were even slightly in on Max Fried, right? But again, look at the Max Fried contract. It was an overpay by the Yankees, and it would have been an overpay by the Red Sox if they would have got him for the 7 years they offered him. And I think it was 7 years, 200 they offered, or 7 years, 200 that Boston offered Fried. So it would have been an overpay anyway. So I don't know what Stearns thought was going to happen here. He even talked about Manaea, about his price being extremely high as well. Like what are we doing here? If Stearns believed that the prices weren't going to be high for everybody, then what was he thinking? Because and this is what I was getting concerned about, Chris. And we talked about this prior to getting Juan Soto, and when the winter meetings just started, that the Mets had to get a top line start. Again, The offseason's not over yet. There's a long way to go. Then, Luis Castillo might not be the only trade for a top-line starter. Somebody we don't know could be available. Obviously, there was some talk about the Pirates. I know that wasn't official talk, but I don't see how that could be possible with Keller and Jones. That the Pirates can possibly trade one of them. Like, I don't see why they would
happening.
do that.
No chance.
Yeah,
No chance.
I don't believe that either. And even so, right? They weren't willing to give up 4 top 15 prospects, or maybe even 3 top 10 prospects for Crochet, but you're gonna do it for guys like that. Isn't that kind of like a similar elk where Keller is really good and we know Jones is pretty good, but I mean, what's the difference? So I don't know. I'm upset about it because now we're going to either have to completely overpay for Corbin Burnes, which again, I don't care, but it seems like the Mets care, right? They're already making comments about Manaea and the cost that he's going to probably get. And Corbin Burnes is going to be extremely higher. So I just don't know what they're doing anymore, right? They're going to talk to Nick Pivetta. Wonderful. Yeah, bring him in. Why not? Let's get a number 4 starter in here and hope for the best, because right now we're on that hope plateau right now, and I don't like it at all.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk about, we're going to go through each of these pitchers individually, and we're going to take a look at their 2024 stats. I mean, we're going to talk about Manaea. There's a lot of reports that you missed if you were out all day, Rob, by the way, especially some reports surrounding Cease and the Padres and them being willing to listen in on some of their star players. So we'll talk about all of these guys that could be trade targets for the New York Mets. Again, in my recent video on my channel, I also alluded to 2 names that we haven't really talked about as well that we can talk about here in this stream. But listen, this is a hell of a deal for the Boston Red Sox. Again, they don't even give up 1 through 3. It's 4 and 5 that they start this out with in, on the Crochet front. And now we're hearing, because again, right, now we're hearing that Boston, per JP Morosi, is working on another pitching deal via trade, because again, we don't know if they're involved in the Corbin Burnes sweepstakes or not. They have the money to spend, but the Blue Jays are reportedly interested. I highly doubt he goes there, but they are offered to, presumably, able to offer him the most money. The Giants are interested, kind of that hometown team with him being from California. I'm sure there is a flurry of other teams that are out there in on Corbin Burnes. But again, I agree with you, and we'll talk about Corbin Burnes here in just a second. I want to focus this in on the Boston Red Sox real quick in terms of the rest of the market, but they are in talks. And again, this is reported, but still kind of unofficial, about them approaching the Seattle Mariners and trying to strike a deal for a starting pitcher, given the excess of prospect capital that they have. Now, again, the Mariners have 1 through 5 in their rotation, just studs. I mean, that is one of the better rotations in the entirety of the MLB. I mean, that's a top 5 rotation. You could argue that it's a top 3 rotation. And so, they mentioned the Seattle Mariners. They didn't mention Castillo's name specifically. I know that there were some talks before about them trying to inquire about Logan Gilbert as well, but Castillo would make more situational sense. So what do you think of the Boston Red Sox as continuing to be just straight up competition for the Mets, whether it's free agency, whether it's via the trade route for all these pitchers? Because again, if they are willing to open up, their bankroll for starting pitchers and forego the trade route, well, maybe they don't have to go all in on a Corbin Burnes, right? Because they already have their co-ace or ace in Garrett Crochet. Shawn Manaea is out there that's been heavily linked to the Boston Red Sox if he doesn't come back to the New York Mets. Same thing with Walker Buehler, another candidate that is on presumably the Mets radar. How do you assess this competition for these starting pitchers, already given an inflated market and now having to compete with such a talented organization in terms of their prospect capital for trying to filling out your rotation for 2025 and beyond if you're the New York Mets?
Yeah, if it's Gilbert, if it's Castillo, if it's Dylan Cease, again, the Mets weren't willing to give up 2 top 10 prospects. Like, it seems like that, maybe even 3 top 15 prospects. They weren't willing to do that. So I don't see them going a little bit lesser and giving 2 top prospects in the top 10. So here's my problem. The Mets are going to be holding the bag. I don't think they're trading for somebody now that's up in that caliber of top 10. Maybe they can, Luis, but here's the problem, right? I see the Mariners trading Castillo because it sheds a ton of payroll and let them get some offense. But the issue is, what if a team like Boston is willing to give? Remember, they didn't give no top 3 prospect, right? 1, 2, and 3 is still in their system. What if they go out and says, we want Gilbert, and they give a package that the Mariners can't refuse? They're not also trading Castillo as well.
Agreed.
They're not going to shed their whole rotation or 2/5 of it, and then expect them to go out and get a bat too, and think they're going to be better than, hopefully better than they were last year. Like, you're taking away too much pitching. So now you're going to have competition for one guy in the Seattle Mariners, and all you need is one team to want one of their pitchers that they believe in, and it might not be Luis Castillo, by the way. It could be Gilbert or another one, Kirby, possibly. I don't think so, but again, all you need is somebody to blow them out of the water with an offer. And now they're not trading Luis Castillo, which is probably the easiest route to get in a top line starter for the New York Mets. Now you got to turn to Dylan Cease. So again, one less pitcher off the board, and now you got to fight and still overpay for a guy that you probably weren't looking at. It probably your plan C option for a top line starter. This is why the Crochet thing was important for the New York Mets, because this was the easiest route besides just paying Corbin Burnes, which again, we all can get on board for. It makes the most sense and the more direct way to get in the top line starter. But again, until we actually start hearing the Mets involved, and again, now most likely the Red Sox probably aren't going to be involved in Burnes. I mean, I don't know.
See.
You'll see the Giants out there is probably going to be a heavy competition for Corbin Burnes. Maybe the Padres. I don't see why they would be anymore, considering that Dylan Cease is on the market. But, one of the West Coast teams are really in the top line spot for Roki Sasaki. And that's why I haven't brought Sasaki up to the Mets at all, because this has nothing to do with the Mets and their pockets. This is what Sasaki wants. Until we know or have a good indication that Sasaki's really looking to become a Met, it's irrelevant to speak about. So again, either the Mets believe that, and if they believe this, then good for them. But I don't. And if you believe in Sproat right now, and that's what they're gonna give you, if this turns out that we're gonna end up getting a Pavetta and a Manaea, I don't want to hear nobody saying, "Oh wow, yeah, that's a good rotation." No, it's not. It's a subpar rotation, and now you have question marks. And guess what? And again, I keep on talking about the same thing, Chris. You get into this season with at more than one question mark. You're already gonna have more than one question mark. Even if you do get a top line starter, you're gonna have 1 or 2 question marks in the rotation, maybe 3, that you're hoping that can step up and be better than they were last year. You're still gonna have a conversation about a top line starter at the trade deadline. And again, this is the same thing. The Mets not going for it, right? Not doing enough, and then you have to scratch and claw at the trade deadline to get some. And if the Mets are not willing to give up the prospects, then I don't know what we're doing here, right? You know what? Then don't sign Pete Alonso. Put Vientos to first base. Leave Mauricio at third base. You know what? Put Acuna at second and hope for the best, because this is what you're doing here. It makes no sense to me.
Rob, I think you're panicking. I think you're hitting the panic button too early. I think you're hitting the panic button too early. I think it's way too early to tell. There are still a lot of other options and a lot of different ways that don't include Garrett Crochet in how the Mets could build this rotation. And I do agree with you, though. I 100% agree with you that Garrett Crochet was the easiest, so to speak. I'm going to rephrase that. Garrett Crochet was the easiest if the Boston Red Sox weren't involved. And that's what we were all holding out hope for, if the Boston Red Sox weren't involved. if they were the immediate favorites, which is exactly how it played out. So again, I can't fault David Stearns for not, maybe he did offer up a package that had Brandon Sproat included in it, right? Maybe he did. We don't know. I'm sure it'll come out with what the package they offered was. I would hope that it does in terms of the reporters doing their due diligence. But even if he did, even if he offered up Jet Williams and Brandon Sproat, chances are the White Sox still go with the Red Sox offer, because guess what? Even in the back end of this deal, their number 11 prospect is light years ahead of what the number 11 prospect is for the New York Mets. Does anybody know who the 11th ranked prospect for the New York Mets is? I'll save you some time. It's Jonathan Santucci. And this guy hasn't pitched at all yet, at all. And he has injury concerns coming from, I believe, the University of North Carolina. So again, this is a situation where the Mets were outmatched, and we were hoping that the Red Sox weren't involved. That was the only way, in my opinion, we would have gotten Crochet. Going toe-to-toe with the Boston Red Sox in this deal would not be the smart option. That would not be the smart thing. I think it's actually smarter to now pivot to a different trade at this point, right? But I will say on the flip side, Castillo makes the most sense if this Boston Red Sox and Mariners rumor is true, because Castillo has that deal attached to him. Logan Gilbert does not. He's owed like maybe $9 million this year, and he's still in arbitration. So if the Mariners really want to open up significant money, it's going to be Luis Castillo out of all the guys in their rotation, I would have to think. So again, this is another scenario where maybe the Mets are going to have to compete if they're seriously in on Luis Castillo again with the Boston Red Sox. And again, even given the Garrett Crochet trade, they're going to be outmatched, which is why I will say I have not been confident in the Mets going after Corbin Burnes. I'm still skeptical, probably more so 75% in terms of it not happening. But this actually makes me think that even though we haven't heard anything diddly squat about the New York Mets being involved in Corbin Burnes talks, maybe, just maybe, this opens up the door for that front office and primarily Steve Cohen, because we know David Stern's philosophy on pitching is not to give a pitcher, even of that caliber, that kind of deal, to maybe check in on Corbin Burnes and overpay if you have to. Now, again, it really is going to be dependent on the rest of the market, whether it's free agency or whether it's trade. So I kind of wanted to talk about these pitchers one by one, line by line. I guess let's talk about, who should we talk about first? I think the most likely, and what we've been hearing recently, is Shawn Manaea, right? Per JP Morosi, left-handed pitcher Shawn Manaea is viewed within the industry as likely to surpass Eovaldi's 3-year, $75 million contract. All along, this should not be a surprise. This was a surprise to me, but given the market and what it's been so far, it's now not a surprise to me at all that the asking price AAV-wise is 25 plus for Shawn Manaea. It's all about the years when it comes to Shawn Manaea, not the total contract value. I can see the Mets going up to 4 for $100 million, that's 25 per over 4 years. But if there's any team out there that perhaps is like, wow, well, we really need Shawn Manaea and we're able and willing to go that extra 5th year, I think that the Mets are going to have discussions about not going to that 5th year, which would be another pitcher that they could possibly lose out on. Again, we are live here. We are refreshing our feeds. If there's any news during these MLB winter meetings, I believe it's the last day of the winter meetings, we will let you know and we'll break the news here for you and talk about it. But as of right now, nothing is solidified other than the Mets meeting with Pivetta and his agent. We'll talk about that here in the next slide. What do you think about Shawn Manaea's market? I think that the viewers and subscribers, if you've already been here on our channel, on our Mets Hot Stoves, we both agree that Shawn Manaea is not an ace. He's not an ace. He's not going to serve that for a rotation as much as Garrett Crochet would. He had a tremendous bounce back season, but there's still uncertainty with how he follows that up if he's given a long-term deal. So what do you think about this comparison to the Eovaldi contract, Rob? How far are you willing to go, and how far do you think the Mets are willing to go?
It makes sense. It's going to be more than Eovaldi. Manaea actually was better, overall than Eovaldi. Again, Eovaldi has the pedigree, the postseason experience, the World Series experience. And he, for all we know, Evaldi took less money to go back to where he's comfortable in the Rangers, and that's a possibility as well. That who knows, the Mets might have, or other teams might have offered him more. But you know what? Sometimes it's just comfortability, and you're just hoping that. And it's sounding like more and more Manaea is not going to give a discount to the New York Mets as much as he loved it here, and the Mets fans and the Mets loved him here. We're not getting a discount from him. And again, I'm not saying Manaea should take less. It would be nice, but it's his right to not take less. You know what? If the Mets, I'm not gonna say drop the ball. I'm gonna say drop the ball on thinking that starting pitcher wasn't gonna be a high price premium. As soon as you give $17 million for Montas, as soon as Kikuchi gets $21 million, Severino gets $22 million, you would just assume $4 to $5 million more than the qualifying offer, at least for Shawn Manaea, was just obvious. And with the Stearns comments, again, he gives open-ended answers, and he kind of answers it, but then really doesn't. I'm not even confident they're getting Shawn Manaea. Like, I mean, this is going to be bad, man. I'm telling you right now, it's not looking good. The way the Mets are approaching this, and they seemingly look like they're shocked about the starting pitching market and how expensive it is. I just hope Steve Cohen, pushes Stearns aside and locks him in a hotel room, or locks him in his house, and Steve Cohen just, pull a Correa, get a Burnes, like, get it done. Because this is the one thing I concern myself with David Stearns, right? David Stearns did not get Juan Soto. This was Steve Cohen's baby, right? We all know that. The David Stearns moves have been Montas. Oh, look, Clay Holmes can be a starter, right? And again, I don't mind those moves, right? I get the vision, but there's going to be a point when pitching labs are not going to make Montas a number 2 or Clay Holmes an ace.
I agree.
I think they're relying on that way too much, and I think they're going to get outbid, and they're not going to go above and beyond for Manaea. And you know why they're not going to go above and beyond for Manaea? Because they don't believe he's worth that money. I'm telling you, they don't. And I said this before. They don't believe he's worth that money. They told you when they pitched Kodai Senga in the playoffs over him. They don't believe he's an ace. He pitched like an ace because the other Mets pitchers weren't as good. That's it. Because the Mets didn't have an ace. They had a lot of number 3s, and Manaea was just better than them. That is because they don't believe in high-priced, long-term deals for pitchers. And I know Shawn Manaea can be a 4-year deal, right? It doesn't seem like a lot of years. But, again, Stearns' philosophy when it comes to starting pitching is just not that. And, I was hoping because he had the deep pockets of Stearns that he would get that ace with probably not much of a fight. And, after getting Juan Soto, I feel like they, what is the point then? What is really the point of getting Juan Soto if you're still going to just penny pinch for certain pitchers or most pitchers? Because right now, look, it's only December 11th. I don't want to just.
I was going to say, Rob.
But honestly, how much confident were Met fans that they were going to get a top line starter? No matter who it was, if it was Crochet, Fried, Burnes. I know Burnes is still out there. One of the Cease is out there. One of the pitchers of the Mariners is still out there. Are you confident today that they're going to get a top line starter the way it's been written?
I am.
You're more confident than me. 24 hours ago, I was more confident. Now, I'm not too sure.
You were all in on Crochet. Let me backtrack. That might be the funniest thing I've heard today, Rob. You actually genuinely made me laugh. David Stearns in a room.
Lock him up, man.
Man. I think we all needed a little bit of comedic relief at this point. I actually might have a laughing attack here on the stream. I'm not gonna lie to you. That is the funniest thing I've ever heard. Listen, man, I've said this so many times, and I said it yesterday when we did the stream. I'm gonna say it today. I don't think David Stearns even is naive to the fact of what the New York Mets need at this point. I don't think he's naive to that fact. it's going to probably look like a different route than we all expected in terms of getting that frontline starter. But I again, I'm not going to question or even insult this guy's intelligence in terms of building a competent rotation that can at least compete for a World Series at this time on December 11th. Again, the winter meetings, I will preface this, and I know that you know this, Rob, they're not the end all be all at this point. There's a lot more moves to be had, and we will see top guys that aren't moved or aren't signed past these winter meetings and take another day or two, maybe even another week or two to figure out what their market actually is before they put pen to the paper. So I do understand the worry at the end of the day. We are Mets fans at the end of the day, and I understand the panic, especially when Boston, right, who really needed pitching, that was their need coming into this offseason, have now addressed it. But you know what? Before the Garrett Crochet sweepstakes and trade went down today, I looked at and I saw so many Boston Red Sox fans on my timeline on X panicking the same way we are right now because they lost out on Juan Soto, because they lost out on Max Fried. They were in the same situation and now they're happy. All it takes is one move, and I do think this front office is going to come through for us, whether it's Stearns, Cohen, or both, because I do think they are working in tandem. So I will say that first and foremost. But I agree with you, man. Honestly, I think the Mets max for Shawn Manaea is 4 for 25. I think that's the max. And, you know, as much as I like Shawn Manaea, I don't think he's worth that 5th year if anybody decides to give it to him. I do not think that with what we saw in the short sample size in one season, right? In 2024, again, he had a great season. You see the statistics on your screen: 12-6, 3.47 ERA, and a whip that was approaching 1 flat. That's a hell of a season. Particularly adjusting your mechanics midway through the season and also taking on an ace type role in a rotation you were never supposed to be an ace in. So hats off to Shawn Manaea. He's going to get his bag. But 4 for 125 per is my absolute max and sweet spot right there for a Shawn Manaea contract. So again, we don't know exactly what Shawn Manaea's market is. I know that Boris was talking about him just a little bit and saying that obviously teams are interested, a multitude of teams. We don't know exactly who they are, but at this point, I think it's a given in terms of the actual years, maybe not the AAV, but definitely the years that he will surpass the Eovaldi contract. 3 years for 75, who was also on the Mets radar, by the way. We talked about Eovaldi before he went back to the Texas Rangers. So yeah, that's that. Okay, let's progress this conversation forward as I try not to think about and laugh about locking David Stearns in a room if you're Steve Cohen. I will fix this slide here 1 second. I apologize about that. But talk a little bit about Walker Buehler and Nick Pivetta, who the Mets are meeting with Pivetta and his agent today. Speak a little bit about them real quick while I fix up the slide.
Yeah, Pivetta doesn't excite me. Another number 4. That it really doesn't excite me. You know, Buehler is intriguing because he has ace-like stuff. You know, we've seen him be an ace, you know, coming 2 years after Tommy John. You know, there is a lot of intrigue there, right? But I said he's gonna get 2 for 50. I guarantee you he's gonna get between $20 and $25 million, if not around that, probably closer to 25. I just feel that there's more people that believe in Buehler than most people probably think. And I'm not sure if the Mets are going to do that either. That's why they're in on Pivetta. Like, why haven't they called in Buehler yet? Right? Wouldn't you call Buehler in with a meeting instead of Pivetta? Right? They're getting number 4s. This is what they're looking for. They're looking for projects that they can, you know, Pivetta's a project. He's a number 4 on a, you know, if you just get him, say, okay, go in a rotation, he's number 4. If the pitching lab works its wonders, great, he's another number 3. I don't care if they get Pivetta because it's not going to move the needle for me. And people are going to swing it or, you know, turn it over like, oh, yeah, look what they can do, right? They're relying on the pitching lab too much. And it's completely obvious at that point. They're not willing, you know, again, we don't know the offer that the Mets gave Crochet or for Crochet, but again, it better not be, you know, underwhelming, because if it is underwhelming, then we got a lot more problems to talk about with David Stearns when it comes to giving up prospects than we originally thought. If it was a massive offer and they just took the Red Sox offer, what are you going to do? Right? Maybe I'd be less panic mode right now. But again, the Mets are probably going to sign Pivetta. I guarantee you wake up tomorrow or even later tonight and they sign Pivetta. That's the way I feel.
Well, there are some ramifications, again, if people don't know, to signing Nick Pivetta, because the QO was attached to him. So you'd lose an additional 2 draft picks, and you've already lost 2 by signing Juan Soto because he had the Q. Did he have the QO attached to him? I'm pretty sure he did, right? Obviously, he was. Yeah, he had the QO attached to him. So, and then again, another point with Shawn Manaea is that he also has the QO attached to him. So you'd get those 2 draft picks back, hypothetically, right? If you want to think about it in that light. But yeah, I agree. Historically speaking, the Mets don't go after QO guys unless your name is Juan Soto for obvious reasons. But at this point, we can talk about the desperation factor. Does the Mets front office feel desperate? And they, again, play their cards very close to them. But you can't help but think, with a lot of options coming off the table. Again, I'm not panicking, and I'm not telling Mets fans that they should panic either, because I'm simply not. I'm still confident. But how does this front office view the way these winter meetings are going compared to at the start of the offseason, how they saw it playing out, right? Because again, shit can hit the fan at any moment, and excuse my language, but it can. And, things can change. Markets can be oversaturated or undersaturated, where you haven't had the original plan and you kind of misstepped there or misjudged. And now you're looking at a situation where we had XYZ money allotted to bring in, let's say, 3 pitchers, right? Or 4 pitchers, because the Mets have already brought in 2. And now you're taking a look at 2 pitchers that already are taking up 3/4 or more of that. And I'm not saying the Mets are constrained on money. That's not what I'm trying to sell anybody on. But teams have certain price points for certain players that they would ideally not go over. Unique circumstances of going over that are Juan Soto, Corbin Burnes, and the top line free agents, right? Other guys like these realm of pitchers, these mid-tier pitchers to lower end pitchers, Pivetta and Walker Buehler, and I've been on record by saying Pivetta could be a starting pitcher 3 in another world scenario, because he's pitched like 1 for the past, at least 2024. But again, with what we've seen from him consistently, we think of him more of as like a starting pitcher 4. But if you have Montas and Blackburn/Holmes in the back of your rotation, and you sign Pivetta, right, and not a frontline ace, I mean, he's going to be your starting pitcher 3, which I'm sure nobody wants, right? We don't want that. So again, the numbers on your screen are serviceable if you're slotting him in right in front of Montas, but who's going to be the first 3 pitchers in your rotation in that scenario? That's what we all want to know. So again, there's a route that the Mets can take to bring in a surplus of arms without getting that frontline starter. But that's not the route that you and I envision for this team. And with everything that we've seen from these winter meetings, from the reports, I mean, Anthony DiComo just dropped an article basically saying that's a wrap from Dallas. I'm not sure if he's talking about for himself or for the Mets, because I hope it's not for the Mets, right? Talking about, the Mets, and Scott Boras said the Mets are willing to spend big. And Passan said that as well, unleashing the Kraken. I mean, we can hear this all day long until we actually see it materialize. And again, I'm not going to doubt the Mets don't have bigger plans, because it's only December 11th. But with free agents slowly starting to sign, the trade market starting to present itself. And by the way, I think this is just a tip of the iceberg in terms of the options that are going to be available via trade, because we're going to talk about a couple of other names here in just a second. But again, I think that Rob and myself definitely have an understanding of where we would slot in both Buehler and Pivetta into this rotation. And let's say a signing does happen. The Mets go and do the extraordinary in terms of signing a QO attached pitcher for the rotation. You still need more by a long shot. You still need more. So anything else to say about these 2 guys? Because you see the rotation underneath both of these guys' pictures. Hodai Senga, question mark, Peterson, Montas, and either Blackburn/Holmes. That's and again, 2 spots that are question marks, but that seems like a mountain to climb in this free agency at this point, right, Rob?
Yeah, and again, we haven't brought it up yet, but the Mets brought one of their top trainers to Japan to be with Kodai Senga for whatever reason. They said it's what they do during the season with the pitchers. No, it doesn't. They didn't do that prior to the season last year. They didn't do that when they first got Kodai Senga. They didn't do that. There's something going on with Kodai Senga, guys. You're gonna hear something. I'm telling you this right now. They're not sending a trainer to Japan to check on Kodai Senga and to be with him to work on things. What are they working on? He was supposed to be healthy. That's why you pitched him in the playoffs. This should have been a healthy offseason for Kodai Senga. And him not picking up a ball yet concerns me. So again, anybody who wants to throw Kodai Senga into the ring as your ace, wonderful. Good. Keep on hoping, because Met fans, you're going to end up being the same way you have been over and over again. These guys, here's my prediction right now, or here's my opinion about what David Stearns went into the offseason thinking. This was his plan all along with pitching, with rotation. I truly believe that. I guarantee you the offer is subpar and not even close to the Red Sox offer if that comes out. I have a annoying feeling about that, and I hope I'm wrong. I want to eat my words, but I don't believe there was a competitive offer, because how did the Boston Red Sox swoop in so quickly over 24 hours after they lost out on Fried? As soon as they lost out on Fried, it took 24 hours to right away make this happen? No, the Red Sox were always in the lead, and Crochet was not going to be traded until Max Fried signed. So the Red Sox were always in the lead, guys. Make no mistake about it. They always had the better offer. So that means either Stearns had a subpar offer, or never counted, or even just said, all right, this is my offer and that's it. And again, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I truly believe this is Stearns' plan the whole time. And if you want to agree with that, fine. If you want a prospect hug, fine. Right? People want Castillo. People might want Cease. That is still going to cost you. Right? Luis Castillo, if you look at his numbers, and again, I'd be stupid to say that I wouldn't mind Castillo. Absolutely. But they have been declining. You still owe $108 million, which a little bit more you probably would have had to give Crochet. So the numbers are not crazy. But again, it just seems that they're putting themselves behind the 8 ball, because if you don't get any of these guys, you're going to be looking for a guy like that at the trade deadline. And these two guys that you just brought up, Chris, is one of the guys the Mets need to get. One might be easier to get than the other, but I mean, Burnes is the easiest one to get. I'm sorry to say, Burnes is the easiest one to get, because the Mariners, right, just the same way they pulled the fast one when the Mets got Diaz and Cano and made us give up our number 1 overall prospect. I'm not saying Stearns is going to do that. Like, I don't think he's going to fall and be stupid like, Brody Van Wagenen. But the Mariners don't have to trade any of their pitchers, right? Yes, they would love to shed that payroll of Castillo to get a bat in there, but I don't think they're desperate to do it. And that's the issue, Chris, that I think the Mets are going to fall into, unfortunately. You're still on mute, Chris.
I was on mute. It's been a long day. So yeah, no, I agree with you in terms of Burnes being the easiest guy to get. And let me preface this by saying, because there's so many Mets fans that want to tell me there's nothing that we've heard about the Mets and Burnes. Nothing. I understand that. I'm listening to these reports too. I'm not out of the loop. I understand that we have heard nothing, zip, about the Mets being linked to Burnes. And I understand that this I'm saying would, because again, I still think it's a long shot, but I don't think it's a 0% chance, be out of the realm of what David Stearns usually does. This is not up his alley. He's never done this for a pitcher. He hasn't had to, but again, it just doesn't seem, with his philosophy and where he comes from in terms of being in the Brewers organization, doesn't seem up his alley. So And we haven't even talked about the numbers with these guys, but obviously Burnes is the 1A option for any team to sign. What would you at least, if the Mets, and for some people that I've interacted with, I have to emphasize the word if, because I think some people think that we're speaking in definitive terms at all times, which we're not. We're trying to bring in all possibilities, whether they're realistic or not, of which avenues the Mets can go down. So I want to preface this conversation by saying that if the Mets were in on Corbin Burnes, right? They were never in on Max Fried, reportedly. They were in on Garrett Crochet, failed to give up the prospect capital to make the deal happen. Don't blame them for it, again, with how it played out with Boston's offer. But what would a contract in your mind look like for Corbin Burnes? And I want to also just caveat this, because I see a lot of people suggesting that Corbin Burnes would take a low or a high AAV, low year deal. There's no incentive for him, especially at this stage in this market, to do that. He's what, 30, 31 years old right now. If he took a 3-year deal, opt out after 2 or something like that, something stupid like that, he would be 33. And at that point, he's leaving a ton of money on the table in his next contract. So that's not happening. I hope that we can get past that conversation. It's just not happening. Given what Max Fried just got, and the MLB Network analysts and reporters have been saying the same thing, given what Max Fried just got, Corbin Burnes is probably going to get more in terms of the years, or just around the same. You're talking 8, 9. If a team goes crazy, maybe 10, which is insane to think about. Paying a pitcher until they're 40 years old. Ask the Mets. They know that all too well about how that goes. So what would a realistic contract look like for you? Because, I know that it's a long shot as well, but I'm not ruling out the possibility that some team makes him the highest paid pitcher in MLB history, surpassing Yamamoto's $325 million, depending on the years. So you're talking about AAVs that are around the $35 to $38 million range over either 8, 9, 10 years. I mean, you do the math.
Yeah.
What are you thinking on this front, Rob? And do you think that if it takes that much, that the Mets would seriously be in on Corbin Burnes rather than looking elsewhere, knowing that, again, they'd have to go down the route of uncertainty, prospect capital, and probably not getting as good of a guy, no matter if it's Castillo or anybody else, because anybody else that's on the trade block still isn't as good as this guy right here on your screen.
Yeah, I think Burnes is getting a 9-10 year deal. He's going to get the highest contract in any pitcher in history. He's going to get it, right? He's better than everybody else that was on the market. When Fried got an 8-year deal, that automatically gave Burnes probably a 9 or 10 year deal, probably north of $30 million. You just assume it would be, even if it's 10 years, it's going to be 326 to make it the highest pitcher ever to get a contract in baseball like that. So again, if the Mets are willing to do that, man, I'd be ecstatic if they would do that. But I just don't see him doing that. Like, why didn't they could have done this a week ago? They could have done this the start of the winter meetings right after Soto was done. This could have been an easy situation where, again, this sounds crazy, Chris. But if they're willing to spend money on one more big free agent, and this includes Alonso, if it's between Alonso and Burnes, I go Burnes. Because with Soto, and even without Alonso, the offense is going to be good. Very good. And I feel like the Mets are choosing Alonso over Burnes. And I know Burnes is going to be making a hell of a lot, probably $150 million more than total contract for with Pete Alonso. But there's no reason why they can't do both. And it's feeling like they're only going to go after. It feels like Alonso's going to be their only other big signing. And again, I take Alonso back. That and Soto is a dynamic lineup with everybody else that's in that lineup. And I don't know, man. It's Like plan A, I feel like is out the window with Burnes, Alonso, Soto, right? We got the big fish, man. Go for it, man. Go for it. Like you can mess around so many different ways with the rotation with a bunch of four ERA guys, 4.5 ERA guys, and let the pitching lab do its work for those guys to get them to be a number 3 at best. Maybe a Manaea type would happen again. But at least you got the top line starter where every 5th day you're getting one of the best pitchers in baseball pitching it for your team. And you have an easier chance of winning during the season and not have to struggle. I feel like it's going to be a struggle if you don't do what you need to do. So I don't know, man. I don't think it's going to be Burnes. I find it hard to believe the Mets are going to make Burnes the highest paid pitcher in baseball. I mean, I thought it's probably a simple answer. I don't like starting the winter meetings. I thought it was a simple answer. Yeah, of course the Mets are going to be in on Burnes. You know, why wouldn't they give him the most money? But I don't see that happen, and I hope Stearns shuts me the hell up. And again, I'd be the first one to come on here and say Stearns shut me up. But it's looking more and more likely that he's choosing Alonso over Burnes because it looked like they're going to make one more big sign-in for this team, and it's going to be Alonso probably. So, which is okay. It's just not enough.
We'll circle back on the Corbin Burnes front. I don't have graphics up for these two pitchers, and we kind of mentioned them from the Pittsburgh Pirates already, and Mitch Keller and Jared Jones. I'm still very doubtful. I'm still taking this report, I should say, with a grain of salt. But Just Baseball, Just BB Media, and this report comes directly from Noah Hiles, Pirates beat writer, stating that the Pirates are open to the idea of trading Keller and Jared Jones, and it's reported that they are very available. Very available.
Not for the Mets because they're not willing to give up prospects. So,
listen, man. Keller's okay. I think Keller's okay. He's not a top line starter. I don't think he's a top line starter. He would fall into your starting pitcher 3 realm. He's a workhorse. He'll eat the innings for you, but he's not a frontline starter. Jared Jones. This guy, like in the limited times that I've seen Jared Jones, has elite stuff, and he also has a couple of years of control left. So I'm kind of wondering why the Pirates would even entertain that, given that they have Skeens as well, unless they're going to make a full run at Sasaki, which again, it is possible, but how can you bank on that? And even if that's the case, why wouldn't you just have a 3-headed monster in your rotation with Skeens, Sasaki, and Jones? But Mitch Keller, I understand, I get it, but like, why from the Pirates side of thinking, their side of the fence, why would they be open to trading Jared Jones? I got no idea.
Yeah, I think because the Pirates are not going to spend on the big bat, and the easiest way to probably get top position player talent, even if it's top prospects that are probably, they probably want ready-made prospects position player-wise so they can add to their lineup without spending money. And I think the only way to do that, Keller's not going to bring you enough. I think Jones, and again, I do not see the Mets getting Jones. If they're not willing to give up for Crochet, they're not going to give up for Jones. There's a lot of question mark for Jones as well, right? Not a lot of innings there either. So if anybody wants to bitch him on about Crochet's innings, don't give me, oh, well, Jones is better. How do you know that? He didn't pitch a lot of innings in his career yet. So we're going to go that route. So let's not be a hypocrite when it comes to about innings. So Jones is not happening for the Mets guys, unless David Stearns believes in Jones so much that he's willing to give a similar package, if not better, for Jones over Crochet. And again, do it. I don't care. I truly don't care. Mitch Keller is not going to make me jump out of my seat like a Juan Soto deal or even a Burnes deal, right? Mitch Keller's solid. I could definitely see him making strides to be a number 2. And listen, it's better than what the other alternatives are, in my opinion. But again, God, I don't know. I don't know what the hell. I think that's the reason for the Pirates wanting to trade those guys, because they're not spending big on bats at all. I don't think they're bringing Pete Alonso in. I think since Joe Wolf, the agent for Sasaki, said, he had issues with the media as one of the biggest stars in Japan, he's had issues with the media. He doesn't like a lot of attention. And Wolf brought it up, his agent, saying that he would probably like to start in a small market team. The Pirates fit that perfectly. And he's not going to cost a lot of money at all. So, I mean, if you're going to replace Sasaki and you get rid of Jones, and you probably get a bat or two or three, or at least three top prospects, one of them that can probably fill the role of in your lineup right away.
Can I just say something, Rob? I think you're underestimating the willingness of David Stearns to part with prospects, because they were in the discussion with Garrett Crochet for a long time. Like, they were consistently, that's already been reported, that they were in constant conversation with the White Sox for Crochet. It just so happened that a team that has a farm system times 3, maybe even times 4, better than the New York Mets, swooped in and got him. I think that David Stearns is willing to trade prospects. I think that he also stated that probably when we reported it 2 days ago on our stream. So none of these guys are off the table that we're talking about right now.
That's fine, but right now he has not. And until he does, he doesn't get credit for that at all. Why are we giving credit for something that has not happened yet? Like we can give credit for Stearns for a lot of things, and I trust Stearns. But again, he had an opportunity when the Red Sox were, on hands and knees to get Max Fried. He could have swooped in and gave the White Sox a no-brainer offer and don't play games.
You don't think the White Sox would have just waited for the Red Sox to see if they got him or not? There's no rush for the White Sox either. There wasn't really any rush.
The White Sox are taking a big risk because the Red Sox did get freed. The Yankees weren't outbidding the Mets, and the Mets could have came back and says, you know what, we're not worried anymore because we might give you less now because the Red Sox were the biggest threat, not the Yankees. So, and again, this is the thing about above and beyond, right? This is about going for it, right? This is the whole idea of 2025, right, and beyond. You could have done that. Stop waiting for another team to swoop in. The Mets just did that to Juan Soto, right? They swooped in T-minus in like the last 24 hours and swooped him from the Yankees and took him from the Yankees when Steve Cohen came in with a knockout offer. This is what the Red Sox did to the Mets. Like, you can't sit there and wait. This is even if he had an offer on the table, right? And like, what was there then? You were just waiting for another team to swoop in. Just get it done.
Well, if he had an offer on the table, then there's nothing you can do to fault him until we actually know what the offer was. I mean, he had an offer on the table. Let's just say that's the scenario. He had an offer on the table. Let's say it was Jet Williams, like hypothetically speaking, Jet Williams, Luis Angel Acuna, and I don't know, somebody else, a third prospect, maybe in the lower tier. Let's say Jonah Tong, right? That's 3 top 10 prospects right there. Again, this is hypothetical, but he had the deal out there. I mean, if they don't take it, they don't take it. There's nothing he can do at that point.
Agree. But I don't think that the White Sox were waiting for the Red Sox to see if they get freed, because that could hurt them overall. If the Mets were the second biggest suitor for Crochet, say if it was the Red Sox and the Mets, right? The White Sox are really going to wait for the Red Sox. And if the Red Sox would have got free, what do you think the Mets are going to do? They're going to pull a prospect off the table on the trade offer probably. Well, you're not going to bid against yourself. Well, you're not going to, you know what I'm saying? So until Stearns actually gives up a top 10 prospect or two, I'm not giving him credit for losing out. Like we're trying to be number one. We're not trying to be number two in this scenario here. And right now, he lost that. He lost that battle with the Boston Red Sox. He clearly did. The Boston Red Sox came in right away, right after they licked their wounds for like 5 minutes after they didn't get freed. They needed to counteract what the Yankees just did. And
exactly, which is why the Mets were always outmatched if the Boston Red Sox
Stearns left an opportunity for the Red Sox to come back in there, in my opinion. I hope I'm wrong, man. I truly do, man. I really, really, really hope so. I hope it was a no-brainer offer. And if I see the offer and I'm like, oh shit, man, like, Stearns, if you're willing to do that. But again, we haven't seen anything yet. Say if it was pretty good. then I back off on my comments, right? Right. This is my opinion right now because we don't know the offer as of yet, or at least I haven't seen it yet, right? But if it's a subpar offer, and it was an offer where it was like, oh, maybe we can get one over on them because why not? I feel like until Stearns starts giving away prospects, his words mean nothing to me, and I'm not giving him credit for not doing it. Like, that's the thing, right? There's other guys out there, so he can still do this here. But don't tell me Mitch Keller is proven Stearns is willing to give up top prospects, because it's not going to take that much at all to get Keller.
Hear you.
So I hear you. I don't know, man. It's worrisome, my friend.
Steven saying CP saw your video on Jock Peterson, would love him in a lineup. Me too. If the Mets get Pete Alonso, he'd be a great supplement. Gates of Above is here with the super chat. Appreciate you, Gates. Rob, if the White Sox like the Red Sox prospects, then the Mets, there's nothing the Mets can do. There's too many unknowns with this just to panic. What do you say to that, Rob?
Well, the unknown is, why are you not panicking? Because again, we don't know the offer, right? As of yesterday, the Mets seemingly like they were the favorites to land Crochet, and it was even after Max Fried signed with the Yankees, it was still the Mets still ahead. So if the Mets were negotiating and continuing to negotiate, clearly the White Sox were waiting for a Red Sox offer if it didn't get freed. So did Stearns back out right away? Like, I'm sorry, guys. I'm so sick of this prospect nonsense. I'm sorry.
Jonathan Loaiska just signed with the Yankees, by the way, on a 1-year deal. Breaking news.
Did it say how much?
So right-hander per Jorge Castillo, 1-year deal with the team option for the 2026. No, didn't say how much yet.
Okay, well, look, if it's a similar offer for Mets and Yankees, he's going to go back where he's comfortable, and he was already pitching for the Yankees. So
I'm not a guy that I was concerned about, overpaying for just to get him, but he was a guy that I would definitely liked. Yeah.
No, exactly. So again, if it was similar offers, he's going to go back to the Yankees. Again, David Stearns is clearly not going to overpay for bullpen arms, in my opinion. I think he's still going to go and that plan's fine bullpen wise, in my opinion. But yeah, okay, like it is what it is. I mean,
on to the next. There's a plethora of bullpen arms, is what we know for sure.
Yeah, that's not earth shattering. Like it would have been nice, but I'm not going to go crazy over it. Starting pitch is my concern, not bullpen, because I think Stearns to be okay in that aspect.
Yeah. Lulu's also saying this is something that we also saw happen. Mets did lose Mike Vasil and Nate Lavender to the Rule 5 draft. Vasil went to the Phillies, and Lavender went to the Rays. And by the way, the Phillies actually flipped Mike Vasil, and guess who they traded him to? They traded him to the Tampa Bay Rays. So now the Rays have both of the former Mets prospects in their system. That is a look at what is happening with the Rule 5 draft. The Mets actually lost 8 players, I believe, upwards of 8 players to the Rule 5 draft, and they only gained 1 for any of you that value that. I'm not sure I value that quite as much. Vasil was a guy that had potential, and again, he just had a very down year, and the projectability was a concern, so I don't know. I mean, it is what it is. I don't think we're shedding any tears over that. But, I mean, the Rays, if there's any... Nate Lavender, I'm actually more pissed off that the Mets lost Lavender, because I mentioned him, if above all else fails for a lefty in the bullpen on this market, Lavender would be the shoe-in right there, and just to give him the chance, especially out of spring training. And now he's with the Rays organization, and we all know the pitching lab that they have and their knack for developing young pitching prospects. So that's what happened with the Rule 5 draft. Okay. Castillo. I mean, do we want to talk about Castillo? Because again, this is a guy that we both like.
Yeah.
If the Boston Red Sox are in on him, it's going to be hard to get him. We know that, but this is a guy that was an all-star in 2023, had a down year in 2024, to his standards. I mean, still it was great. North of 175 innings pitched. The walk percentage was pretty respectable, right? Below league average. So he wasn't walking many hitters. I think that, just too many hard hit baseballs given up. And you saw the hits per 9 go up from his 2023 campaign, which resulted in the spike in the ERA. But again, still a very serviceable pitcher and could definitely slot in, at least I think, as a co-ace in your rotation, right? I mean, he's not an ace right now for the Mariners, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, Gilbert, I would probably prioritize Gilbert. Castillo is probably their 2, maybe even 3, if I'm not mistaken. But again, Castillo is more than serviceable, especially when you take a look at the Mets rotation as of right now. So, I mean, what's the real outlook? Are you confident in the Mets getting Castillo? It doesn't seem like you are, based off of our conversations on this stream. It doesn't seem like you are, but what do you think it would take?
It's more likely the Mets could go that route because, again, I think, I mean, would you be shocked if it takes 2 top 10 prospects and take it on that money? I don't think they're going to get that much. But again, if the Red Sox are involved, what tells them, if they're that desperate for starting pitching and to really pair with Crochet, you're not winning that battle, right? Both teams can take on the money, right? They were willing to give Fried 7 years, 200. They were probably going to, if they didn't get Crochet and the Mets would have won that deal, they would have probably really outspent everybody for Burnes. So $108 million is chump change in that aspect of it. So they're willing to take on that money. I hope the Red Sox are out because then the Mets could have a good shot in Castillo. But again, there hasn't been enough conversation or enough, news regarding that Castillo is actually available. And that's the concerning thing, right? I'm leaving Castillo probably out of the spectrum of being traded because there really hasn't been anything. Even during the winter meetings, there hasn't been much talk about it at all. So, obviously that can develop over the rest of the offseason. Doesn't mean the winter meetings are over and the offseason is done. But, until the Castillo noise starts to get a little bit louder, Burnes is it right now. And yeah, you can talk about Jones from the Pirates, but that's 2 guys. Jones is going to cost you probably a lot more, if not very much the same type of package, because now the Pirates have something to work with what the Red Sox gave up for Crochet. So if they want anything similar or more for Jones, are the Mets going to do that? Probably not. So what are we looking at here? Burnes or Keller? We know the obvious choice is. And I feel like the Giants are going to go get Burnes, to be quite honest with you. He's a Northern Cali guy. They're going to outspend. They need stars there. They've been trying to get him for years. They were willing to outpay the Yankees for Aaron Judge 2 years ago. So they're willing to spend money. They just give Willie Adames a massive contract. Burnes, Giants are the favorite to land Burnes right now. And unless if there's similar offers, wouldn't Burnes go back home if the Mets are not going to outbid? Because I think whoever gives the most money to Burnes, that's where he's going to go. So are the Mets going to go $5-10 million more to come to the Mets or go back home to Northern California? So,
well, you think he has a chance to go to the Jays if they offer him the most money?
I don't. Toronto has to be like $700 million to get. But I don't think these guys want to go to Toronto. And there's and for the problem, and I don't think. Well, I think we understand that, but I don't think the Blue Jays fans understand that location is more of a problem. The money isn't the issue. People don't want to go to Canada. It's it just isn't what people want to do, and it's been obvious, right? They could easily, Soto, they were there, but I think they would have had it been. And if the Mets weren't going to get outbid for Juan Soto, then the Blue Jays couldn't do nothing about it. But they did. If say the Giants give 10 for 326, right, which is the highest paid pitcher in baseball history, wouldn't they have to go to 350? You would think, for at least Burnes to think about it. I mean, I'm not saying Toronto is Siberia here, but again, in baseball terms, it is. Like, at least a lot of teams or players believe that. So it's, man, I tell you. I mean, I know people are saying in the chat, Rob, don't be afraid, but you have to be, right? We're losing out on guys that the Mets could have had, especially in the free agent market, right? We can talk about the trades all we want. There's 2 guys there that the Mets could have just for money. And anybody would have been perfectly fine with Burnes or Fried. They're not doing that at this point. They lost out on Fried already. He's the Yankee. Good. Get him out of the NL East. Thank you, Yankees. that makes me feel good that he's out of the National League, right? Pretty good chance that Burnes might be, if he's a Giant, all right, at least he's on the West Coast, but he's still in the National League. But yeah, Ken, the trade deadline, the Mets organization really proved to you that they're willing to trade top prospects multiple times over the last just 4 seasons. Let's just go to the Steve Cohen era. They haven't done that. So, if you're confident in that, go right ahead. But they're acting like the price is going to be cheaper for prospects and the competition is not going to be just as high for a top-line starter at the deadline. So that means you're willing to have an April and May possibility. If the Mets have an April and May like they did last year, I'm not saying they will. But if they do, now we got to work our way back. And on top of that, do massive moves at the deadline. And you're willing to go into this year with question marks. It's stupid. It's stupid. Sorry, Ken, I only saw that comment. So you're talking about 2022. Yeah, they dropped the ball every trade deadline. And if you don't believe that, then you're just lying to yourself. And why do I believe that they're going to do it this year? I don't. I truly don't. Again, they have to prove it. The same way the Wilpons had to prove to Met fans in 2015 that they were willing to do what it took to get Cespedes. When they finally did it, most Met fans almost fainted because they couldn't believe it. Until they give up prospects, either in this offseason or do it at the deadline, which they haven't been willing to, even in the offseasons, when it's probably easier to do so, to solidify your roster, they have not done it. They've dropped the ball. And the confidence level should not be there for a trade acquisition, especially at the trade deadline. And, maybe I hope I'm wrong. Again, this is not me, manifesting that it happens to make me right. I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm dead wrong. But at this point, it hasn't happened yet. And until it does, and that's why spend it on the free agent makes so much more sense, because it gives you less. You can use those prospects for more needs. If you need a big bullpen arm or somebody gets hurt, because that's a possibility as well. You just have to, I don't know. I think it's harder to get a top line starter at the deadline than it is bullpen help or even a minor bat if you need it. I don't know. It sucks, man. Right now, it
depends on the contract. Honestly, it depends if it's a rental or years of control left. Right? I mean, because Garrett Crochet was going to be impossible to get last year for teams when he was still under control versus, I don't know, whatever guy is a rental, right? I mean, if Dylan Cease, if the Padres end up, crapping the bed and they're sellers at the deadline and Cease, isn't offloaded in this offseason, I mean, that's an immediate candidate for teams to go and call up. And I'm not saying the Mets would be interested because the Padres seem to want to get guys out of the NL so they don't have to compete with them for future seasons if they are re-signed. But again, that's just kind of like the difference there between, the deadline versus the offseason. Before we get into some offense talk, I wanted to just take a look at these two guys. One word from you, Rob, to describe either of these trade candidates in Pablo Lopez and Jesus Luzardo. Sorry, I was losing track of my thought for a second. One word to describe both these guys.
Pablo Lopez is an interesting choice. Again, probably a number 3 at best. Luzardo is very intriguing, but again, we could have had him 2-3 years ago if the Mets were willing to give up Brett Beatty, because that was the idea. The Marlins wanted Brett Beatty for Luzardo, and the Mets weren't willing to do it. And that was when Luzardo was actually really good. He had a down season last year. He was mostly injury plagued. And the last 2 seasons have been somewhat injury plagued. So again, I think he has stuff. But again, what are you willing to go for Luzardo? I think he's a free agent after this year. So,
I think he has some control left. Let me look it up real quick. I'm pretty sure he has control left on his contract, at least one more season after 2025.
Regardless of injury, because he has good stuff.
Yeah, he's under arbitration until 2026, so he's not a UFA until 2027.
Okay, and so that means you're gonna have to pay for the control. You are.
Essentially.
I don't know what, but I mean, the Marlins ain't gonna give you him for Brett Brady. I find that hard to believe.
Not straight up.
maybe a number 7 prospect, number 5 prospect. I mean, I'm not going to give I don't even think I'm not going to give a top 5 prospect for him. I think you'd be crazy to do that. But again, the Mets are lining themselves up for a little bit of a desperate take in about a week or two. If the rest of these guys are coming off the board, Pablo Lopez is interesting. Again, you're gonna have to, I'm not sure of his contract, but I'm assuming it would be a money dump by the Twins, and maybe you can get something like that. And that's a solid move. But again, it's not an earth-shattering move where it really solidifies your rotation. It really doesn't. So.
Yeah, I like Pablo Lopez a lot. He had a little bit of a down year in 2024, even though the numbers are still respectable, right? I mean, 4.08 ERA. Again, that's like consistent with the SP3 or 4. He's a workhorse, though. I mean, he's going to be available for teams in terms of eating up the innings, just like a Pivetta is. But he was an all-star in 2023. I think a lot of people don't realize that. The guy that we watched a lot in a Marlins uniform before he signed a multi-year deal with the Twins. And with the way that pitching is going right now, honestly, he's owed $21.75 million over the course of the next 3 years. He's 28 years old, going on 29, entering the prime of his career. I think he could be a sneaky good addition, depending on what the Mets send over. Luzardo has more upside, but again, there's just so many concerns with Luzardo. He has electric stuff. I mean, the fastball from the left side, slider, changeup combination, and a sinker, right? We all know David Stearns loves, sinker ballers, a la Shawn Manaea from the left-hand side, who really used that sinker to have a career year. Manaea did. And so, if you get him in the doors, if they believe in Jeremy Hefner, like the rest of this league seems to believe in, I mean, who's telling what could happen if you bring in Jesus Luzardo? But again, I think Beatty would be in that deal because the Marlins are reportedly interested and have been interested in the past in Brett Beatty going back to last offseason. But you would have a hard time selling. I mean, I don't know. It's kind of a give or take scenario, to be honest with you. I mean, you could sell them potentially on a need of theirs because they just traded away Jake Berger. They're definitely looking to get younger. And given Luzardo has injury concerns, maybe that is enough where the Mets could sell them on Beatty straight up. I would definitely do that. But if anything, it wouldn't take that much more than Brett Beatty, in my opinion. I mean, some lower end prospect or something like that would go back in return. So, I think Luzardo is. I'm struggling to even imagine which one I'd rather go down, the path I'd go down with these two guys. Because again, you're talking about projectability versus the sure thing. Lopez being the sure thing versus Luzardo being the projectability. But I think that either of these guys would fill a need if you don't want to give up the money capital for a guy like Shawn Manaea. I think that Shawn Manaea projects right alongside both of these guys, more so maybe a Pablo Lopez. Depending on, I'm just talking about in terms of production that you could see over the next 3 seasons from both guys. But I think Lopez is underrated, and I think he's better than a lot of people give him credit for. A lot of people see 4.08 ERA and be like, okay, not interested. Why are you showing him on my screen? But he's a solid pitcher. And he has a lot of good experience. So I just wanted to introduce that conversation before we get into some of the offensive reports that we've seen here. In terms of some of the other guys, Scott Boras, etc. Anything else here on the pitching front from you, Rob, that you want to hammer home to the audience?
Yeah, so a lot of people in the chat are talking about Alcantara. Again, he's been injured the last 2 seasons. He had arm issues in 2023, and then they found out in 2024 it was Tommy John. So he hasn't pitched in 2 years. Everybody wants him. He hasn't pitched in 2 years. So if you want to hold your hat on a guy who's been injured the last 2 seasons, again, electric stuff. But he has not pitched in 2 years, basically. If you want to put your hat in that market, and again, he's under control for 2 more seasons with a club option. So you would say, and that club option is for $21 million. So you would have 3 years of control. He's not coming cheap either. Again, guys, until Stearns gives up these prospects for that, I don't believe it's going to happen. Why are we not paying attention to the elephant in the room here? Stearns has not given up prospects yet, right? Regardless of if he lost to the Red Sox or not, he still wasn't ready to give enough prospects to do so. I don't see him doing that with Alcantara either, and there's question marks with injury with Alcantara, right? Are we still dreaming here like we saw Alcantara pitch? He hasn't pitched since 2022. Like, come on, guys. He has not pitched since 2022. Like that's where we're leaving our hats on. Let's score 6 runs per game, but let's give up 7. This is what we're doing here. There's no guarantee that Alcantara is going to be as good as he was 3 years ago. We don't know that. We're living in the past here again. What are we doing?
I would still trade for Alcantara. I'm sorry. I would still do it.
If you're willing to give up top prospects for a guy who hasn't pitched in 2 seasons with the capability of him being good, if he's healthy, right? Why not just do it for guys that were already available, that already pitched? Like, it's backwards. It really is backwards. So it's weird. It really is a backwards way of going about this offseason, right? The money's there.
So far, Rob. So far.
Right? It hasn't happened, right? They lost out on guys. They weren't in on Max Fried, supposedly. Again, please, Stearns, just again, lock him in the hotel room. Cohen needs to just say, you know what? They clearly promised Soto that they were, Soto believed in the Mets enough, even with the money that they gave him, that the Mets were going to go spend more money. Right? I don't think Alonso's enough, but that's your opinion to have. If you think it's enough for the lineup, not enough for the rotation. There's more than enough payroll flexibility right now. Right? We did the math the other day. They're a little bit under $60 million before they hit that third luxury tax. We all believe Cohen doesn't mind going over that. You can get Burnes and you could sign Alonso and probably be right at that third luxury tax number before you do anything else. Like, the money's there. The payroll flexibility is there. Like, it's just, money's just right there. The guy's right there that be had. You can get Burnes and Alonso for probably around $60 million total AAV. And that's a plan A. That's the offseason of fucking dreams. Probably the best offseason in Mets history. Like, that's still capable of happening. Let me be clear about that. And
I wouldn't rule it out. I mean, I think it's a long shot, but I wouldn't rule it out.
I think it's Burnes or Alonso at this point. I think the Mets are leaning towards Alonso because it's a cheaper way. It's a cheaper route to go.
We're going to transition real quick here into some of the offensive reports surrounding the New York Mets. Just wanted to shout out everybody in the chat. The chat has been popping. Whether you're in Rob's live chat or my live chat, please do hit the thumbs up. We appreciate the support, the continued support through this off season, and all the streams and videos that we do. Again, it does not go unnoticed. And I'm reading your guys' comments and the discussion that we're having surrounding the pitching. Because again, there's multiple different perspectives and there's a lot of different ways the Mets could still go about this offseason. I think that we both know that and understand that the trade market really hasn't set itself. And I understand that Garrett Crochet was the guy to get in a lot of people's minds. Rob, he was the guy to get in your mind. I still think that there's going to be a lot of pitchers, whether we've talked about them or not, which is why I wanted to bring Lopez and Luzardo into the conversation. Because again, I think that they're viable options. Are they going to be an immediate co-ace? No, I'm not going to sell you on the fact that they are. But again, in terms of, pitchers that could help you immediately for presumably a cheaper price point. Again, I'm not telling or trying to sell Mets fans on the fact that we need to be cheap. I think it's well established that the Mets have money to work with and room to work with. I mean, DeComo's, saying it, Passan's saying it, Rob, you're saying it, I've been saying it. So again, December 11th, we'll see how this materializes, but the Mets obviously need pitching. Now that the Juan Soto deal is officially through, I believe his press conference is scheduled for tomorrow, which should be absolutely electric seeing him officially in a Mets uniform for the first time. Also believe it's going to be in person in New York, which makes it even better. Gone are the days that we do these Zoom interview press conferences. And again, I don't think that they would do that for a signing of this caliber, but we have some room for offensive flexibility, whether it's moving guys to clear roster spots or just signing free agents straight up. And the first guy that I want to talk about here is Starling Marte, because per Pat Ragazzo sources, the Mets are open to trading outfielder Starling Marte for relief pitching help and have been talking to teams about potential deals. That is straight from Pat Ragazzo. Starling Marte, we all know the injury concerns. He's 34, 35, going on 36, somewhere around that range, mid-30s. Legs seem to be giving out just a little bit in terms of being a full-time right fielder, and that's not really going to happen with Juan Soto being out there, presumably for the long term. 1 year, $20.75 million left on Marte's contract. He is up. The contract is up after this year, and nobody's going to be paying the full $20.75 million for Starling Marte. Nobody's doing that. Absolutely nobody. So they would have to eat some of this contract, whether it's half of it, whether it's 3/4 of it, or whether it's the whole damn thing, as Steve Cohen has, done in the past with even higher contracts, talking about $40 million plus for, Scherzer and Verlander, right? So what is your stance on this? Because there is a name that I've talked about on my channel, and again, offensively, because I still think that there's room for the Mets to strengthen, obviously, first base, and we'll have the discussion around Pete Alonso and some of Scott Boras's comments today, but also strengthening the DH spot. And there's another high-caliber offensive guy that hasn't really shown his full potential due to injuries and just a little bit of inconsistencies, but the projectability is there. Also, who happens to be in the south side of Chicago right now in Luis Robert Jr., and you can go ahead and clear Marte's roster spot and have the upside of Robert Jr.'s bat. I would be all for that. But again, it's not just limited to Luis Robert. You have a lot of different bats that you could presumably either make the move for via trade or go ahead and sign in free agency. Another name that I made a video about 2 days ago is Jock Peterson. Jock Peterson fits into this lineup if you re-sign Pete Alonso perfectly, absolutely perfectly. And that's something that we haven't discussed on this stream, and we could do that in conjunction to the Pete Alonso conversation here in a second. But the Astros are a very interesting team to watch out for in some of the latest reports that we've been hearing out of that camp, because before we signed Juan Soto officially, we were talking about Kyle Tucker, right? And they seem to be progressing a little bit on the Kyle Tucker sweepstakes in terms of the trade front. Now, multiple teams are in on Kyle Tucker, the Yankees being one. I think that's a pipe dream for them, but I know their fans are still believing and hoping in that, as they should, but I don't think they're getting him. The Cubs are seemingly the front runners for Kyle Tucker. Again, the Mets aren't going to be in on that market, but what do you think about the Starling Marte situation? And we all know that he is great buddies with Juan Soto, which makes this a little bit shocking, but at the end of the day, you have Juan Soto here. If you're trying to build a championship roster and make this the most efficient lineup as possible, you got to do what you got to do. And I think that we can all agree that Starling Marte's best days are behind him. He hit efficiently. He hit actually really well in 100 at-bats against lefties. So if you're able to bring in a platoon lefty, like they had last year with Winker, or even a Jock Peterson to be a platoon DH, sure, that's awesome. But if there's a world where you can clear the roster spot to be more flexible, I would be all in on that. What do you think, Rob? And hold it down real quick. I'll be right back in 1 second.
Yeah. So with Marte, right? Obviously, you see it on your screen there, $20.75 million. The Mets will probably have the most, if not all of that, to get anything. You're not trading Marte to just open up a spot here, right? They're trading Marte to see if they can get something for him. If that's a lower level bat, maybe a bench bat, which I don't see that happening, but they're probably going to try to get some type of bullpen arm for Marte by eating up that money. So I want to make this clear, guys. There's a possibility the Mets might not bring back Manaea. That's probably going to be around $24-25 million. Again, still possible, but again, they're willing to eat 20.75, but not an extra 5 to 6 million to sign Manaea, which again can still actually happen. But again, it's funny to me because you can give, Burnes $30 million, which is $10 million more what you'd be paying Marte, but they're willing to eat Marte's contract. You see the logic in that? Where's the logic in that? The only logic in trading Marte is that there's kind of a logjam in the outfield at this point, right? Nimmo in left, Theory, Tyrone Taylor in center, and obviously Soto in right field. So the obvious thing is to trade Marte and see if you can get something for them. Like, that's where we are. I mean, I'm thinking you could probably get an okay bullpen arm if you eat most of the money, if not all. Yeah. So, I don't think Marte's going to be on this team. Very sure. I think the Mets are probably going to try to get a bullpen arm for Starlin Marte. And again, most teams, it's a 1-year deal basically. So if you're going to pay most of the money, you probably get something decent for him. If you're going to get most money, right? They get a guy that still can hit lefties very well. He's not as good as he was 2 years ago in the outfield, but when the team that's acquiring him is not really spending much on him, you can probably get a bullpen arm. I'm thinking. I don't think you can get any type of bat. I mean, maybe you can, but I'm thinking more of a line of bullpen help. That would be the route that they would go. So, Marte was a solid bet. I think he's going to be gone, Chris. It kind of makes sense considering the fact that, the outfield is kind of, crowded right now, and Marte wouldn't be, if the opening day started tomorrow, he would be on the bench or at least a DH. Like, I'm surprised the Mets wouldn't think of him about the DH. And I do wonder, where are they going with the DH spot? Because I think we talked about Marte possibly being a DH platoon or just a DH itself. What are they going to do with the DH option, considering the fact that we would probably put Marte there if he was still if he was still going to be on this team on opening day? Are they going to leave that open and just like rotate, or actually go get a Jock Peterson?
Would love Jock Peterson on this team. I'm not going to lie to you. I would love Jock Peterson on this team. Yeah, we'll see who bites on the Starling Marte front. Another outfielder, and this is interesting in terms of what the Guardians just did with that trade, sending Andres Jimenez over to the Blue Jays and getting Spencer Horwitz and then flipping him to the Pirates. That organization, we talked about that just a little bit, right? And there's a name in terms of the outfield perspective that I would love to pursue. And I've been on record for saying that Lane Thomas should definitely be on the radar of the New York Mets as an upgrade defensively and offensively, even over a guy like Starling Marte. And at that point, you would probably have too many spots in terms of giving out, because you'd have two true center fielders at that point with Lane Thomas and Theory, which is not bad, right? But if you want to put a offensively dominated lineup out there, you would be able to, in a world, just DH Juan Soto for a handful of games or however many games they feel comfortable. Again, I know that's not going to be an everyday type of thing, but the same thing with the pitching front is the same thing with the offensive front in terms of the philosophy with this team. Not the more guys you bring in, but the higher quality guys you bring in, regardless of what their contracts look like. And as long as these guys are able to play multiple positions and bat in multiple different spots in the order, I think it's about bringing the most flexibility as possible for David Stearns, for Mendoza to utilize in 2025. So, if it's about clearing, you can kill two birds with one stone, right? You can go ahead and offload Marte for a reliever. You get a reliever on your roster, fantastic. And then you're able to go ahead and trade for, in conjunction, or sign an outfielder to platoon or, what have you, be a DH, etc., right? Whether it's Jock Peterson, I know that he's a full-time DH at this point of his career, or a guy like Lane Thomas, Robert Jr. I mean, Robert is also, with his injury concern, I would have no problem with just making him a DH and just for his offensive upside. But, we're getting a little bit too far ahead of ourselves, because the main question is any team going to at least bite on Starling Marte? That is the first and foremost question. And I think that a contender is going to have to be willing to take him on in terms of taking the roster spot. I mean, he's a guy that can still, again, make an impact for an organization. But given how crowded the Mets outfield is already, I just don't think it's going to be for the New York Mets in 2025. So, yeah, we'll see. This caught me by surprise, because this whole entire offseason, I was under the assumption that it was going to be too hard, or just straight up the Mets would just eat the $20.75 million and just let him play through the rest of his contract. But now that we're getting this report, I like the vision that I'm seeing in terms of them at least understanding that it's probably best to try to find a trade suitor for Starling Marte. So we'll see if it actually happens. I still have my doubts and reservations. I think that most of that $20.75 million will have to be eaten by Steve Cohen and the New York Mets. So that's another conversation.
Chris, with Marte as well, right? That opens up an opening day roster spot, the 26-man roster spot. If you trade Marte, that might lean towards leaving another infielder on this roster, like leaving Acuna if he's not going to be the starting second baseman. He might not have to start in the minor leagues. He might actually start, on the opening day roster. And I know people want Acuna to start on second base, and I think we all agree here. But McNeil's still a New York Met. Until he's not, I really find it hard to believe that the Mets are going to play Acuna over McNeil when McNeil's still on this roster, right? I know that people can't get past that mindset. But again, the reason why Acuna was up is because Lindor got hurt and McNeil was hurt. They were kind of out of options, right? The options are there now. I know people don't like McNeil. Trust me, most of us don't, and all of us don't mostly. But again, you're looking at it from a perspective of you just want to see Acuna, right? McNeil is still on this team. Acuna probably could be on this roster if Marte's not here. So that could be an option as well, leaving that roster spot available for an Acuna. Because, the infield is kind of not crowded right now. It's kind of up in the air with the bench. So there's options there. But I think the Mets might only go with maybe one bench outfielder. Would they go with two? I don't think so. So you might have an extra infielder on the bench than probably an outfielder, Chris, if you get rid of Marte.
I mean, I'll do you one better. Maybe that opens up a roster spot consistently, especially in the DH category now that we're on the conversation, for Ronnie Mauricio, who's a switch hitter.
Okay. Hey,
and then you're able to keep Luis Angel Acuna as well in that scenario. So again, I think the idea here is just opening up that roster spot in general, right? If the Mets are going to make this push to go younger, at least give these guys the chance if we're on that path. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And again, I think we all agree we would want to see Acuna opening day on second base over McNeil. And, again, Acuna's still on the table to be being traded, guys. Let's make no mistake about it, right? If you believe Stearns and he's willing to give up top prospects, and again, I don't know where loyalty lies with Stearns with certain players, and we all don't know that. Again, Acuna was a necessity last year. Jet Williams was somewhat injured and not really ready, and Ronnie Mauricio was injured. So the only guy that they really had was Acuna. So Acuna was because of necessity, not because he was so good in the minors, because at that time he wasn't doing well. They needed him because Lindor and McNeil were hurt. And that's why Acuna came up. We forget that part, that we thought, Stearns didn't make a great, move here, thinking that, it was a smart move. He had no choice. Acuna was basically the only guy other than Iglesias that was already up here. So, Acuna can still be a trade option here. Everybody, looking at Castillo and looking at a possible Jones from Pittsburgh, or come up with another possible pitcher that you can trade for. Acuna is going to be brought up in offers. And what happens, guys? How would you feel if David Stearns' package for Crochet involved Acuna?
I would have been fine with it. I would have been fine with it, honestly.
Me too. But again, they're not going to live with that. Because we didn't do it, they can probably take a sigh of relief. But again, we still don't know what Stearns believes in any of these guys at all. And I think he likes Mauricio over Acuna, to be quite honest with you, because all he talks about is Mauricio. Almost every time prospects come up, he always brings up Mauricio, because Mauricio probably has much more of an upside than Acuna, even though Acuna can be damn good. And truly, I can't wait for this. I hope this package comes out like passing. Come on, get on it, buddy. Find the package. Let's go. Deal's done. Find the package, because I tell you right now, people will be shocked that Acuna might be in that deal.
I don't think there were some initial rumors that Acuna was going to be in that deal as a headliner or in one way or another. There was initial reports about that.
Yeah,
I don't think it would be. I personally wouldn't find it shocking, but I could see how some would. The sense that I get from Mets fans is that a lot of people, Acuna is their top guy not to trade. And we can all have our differences and opinions about whether you're not.
Yeah, I think it's Gilbert.
Right. I
Again,
would.
Acuna was a necessity last year, guys. Why he was up? He wasn't up because he was lighting up the minor leagues. Because when the Mets brought him up, he was struggling. They had no other choice to go to because of Lindor and McNeil's injuries. That's why Acuna came up, right? This wasn't Stearns being, as smart as we all believe he is, thinking that, Acuna was going to, jumpstart this team. It was necessity, and Acuna did help this team, obviously, later in the year into the playoffs, right? Again, Acuna, see, look at the chat. They all want Acuna to be the second baseman, right? They think he's going to be a dog, which I can agree with you on. But you know what? How would you feel if he was in that deal? If he was in that package, that means Stearns was willing to give up to get Crochet. And then that would kind of counteract where I was right when it comes to where we don't know where Stearns is at with our farm system. For all we know, he doesn't like anybody in our farm system except for maybe Sprout, right? We don't know that. But the package, if we find that out, will probably give us a really good idea of who he's willing to put in the deal and give up on, so to speak.
That's the guy that I wouldn't have traded as Sprout, but any one of the. So again, it's not about what name, it's about the combination in terms of how much you're truly giving up. Sure. Like, I'm willing to part with any one of our prospects not named Brandon Sprout if it was up to me in a trade for Crochet, but there are certain boundaries that you start to cross, especially competing with the Red Sox offer in terms of how much, right? The quantity, not the actual name, right? Because again, if we are saying that the Mets need a frontline ace, it's more concern of depleting the entire farm system for one guy rather than the fact that you're giving away one player that could be something elsewhere and not in the Mets organization. So again, as big of a fan as I am of Drew Gilbert, I like Acuna a lot. Love Ronnie Mauricio. Jet Williams is okay to me. Again, I think of all those guys, I'd rather keep over Jet Williams, to be honest with you. Now that's kind of crazy, and we're going to have our differences in opinions. But, one of those guys is okay to part with. You'd probably have to do two of those guys. You definitely have to do two of those guys now that we know exactly what the Red Sox gave up. And again, I think that the Mets just could not compete. But Marcus is saying Marte, McNeil, Beatty, and Jet to AZ for Zach Gallen. Local media in Phoenix are discussing D-backs maybe not being able to afford to keep Zach Gallen, which is Zach Gallen's a stud, man. I think the Diamondbacks lucked out in getting him from the Marlins. I'm looking at the stats right now. Here's a 2023 All-Star, battled some injuries in 2024 at the start, but was still able to post 148 innings. He's great. He's a frontline starter, but again, the Diamondbacks also on the flip side of that comment, Marcus, is that they've also in recent years in the off seasons past, right, have been showing the willingness to spend that money, right? Whether it was a mistake in Jordan Montgomery, whether it was going out and being aggressive and getting Eugenio Suarez, like they are a team that obviously made the World Series when they did, and they lost, and they realized that they're a smaller market team, but they still need to be aggressive in terms of retaining talent and also going out to get talent. 2024 didn't go their way, but I don't think Zach Gallen's a guy that they're going to actually part with, especially not this early on to the offseason. So I like what you're thinking in that. I just don't see it as realistic as perhaps a Castillo trade or, maybe a Crochet trade would have been. That's my 2 cents on it.
Well, I think Gallen has a year left, right? He's a free agent after this year.
He's a free agent this year, yeah.
Okay, so it's still going to cost you. Probably not as much as Crochet, but it's still going to cost you. And I think somebody put in the chat that John said, I heard Chicago wanted Williams, Gilbert, and Acuna. And we talked about that yesterday on the Hot Stove. We would have done that. We would be hesitant with Gilbert, but we would have made that trade, right? I think we would have done that. Even though I would have been a little hesitant, but again, as much as we might like Gilbert, we still don't know what he's going to be. And when you got Juan Soto, when you got Brandon Nimmo, and, center field is open,
that's a win now move. And you take a look at the middle infield prospects that the Mets have coming up. I mean, you're talking about an outlook of 2027, 2028. That's the next realistic time that those prospects would have had a major league impact. So at that point, if you are surely getting a guy like Garrett Crochet, maybe you do think about it with the, awareness that You have Jet Williams, middle infielder, unless he transitions into the outfield. You have a guy like Acuna, middle infielder, needs to transition into the outfield or maybe could take over McNeil at second base. But you also have a guy like Jeremy Rodriguez, right? I mean, Colin Houck, who struggled early on into his minor league career, 100%. I'm not trying to bank on those guys being the next best thing, but you do have a surplus of middle infield prospects coming up. Again, this is why I said going back into even our mid-season content when the Mets weren't doing so hot and it looked like they could be sellers at the trade deadline before they picked it up. The Mets this offseason, I was looking ahead. I was just like, they're going to have a very hard time understanding the combination of which prospects they want to keep and which prospects are actually going to make an immediate contribution versus which ones could be excess and could be, thrown out there. I don't think, again, for the right guy, no prospects minus maybe Brandon Sproat are off limits. And you talk about wanting to develop a homegrown guy, to the caliber of some of these pitchers that we've seen in other organizations. I mean, that could be Brandon Sproat. Could be, again, but there's just a lot of different scenarios here. I don't think that anybody really is off limits for David Stearns at the end of the day. I'm just giving you my opinion that it would be Brandon Sproat in an ideal scenario. But again, I think the name of the game here at the Mets is just surplus of middle infield talent. And again, the Mets are doing a great job in terms of converting some of these middle infielders into outfielders anyways, and giving them that experience in the minor leagues. But that transition in terms of being game ready at full speed at the major league level is something that's going to be an adjustment, right? For years. I mean, for maybe like at least a year or two. So it's not an easy transition. So that's kind of my take on that. But that's all I got on Starling Marte. Again, we'll see. I don't know what the market for Starling Marte would really be. Because again, you're not going to trade into the White Sox. They have no value for Starling Marte unless you're attaching prospects and paying down, the contract. There's no value for Starling Marte on the Chicago White Sox. So I'd be curious to see which team is actually in on him, even if it's for a reliever, right? Yeah.
I agree. I think Marte is going to return a reliever, depending on how much you got to pay to get him. You might get a solid reliever or a decent reliever. I just wanted to bring up what people are bringing up in the chat about, you brought up Zach Gallen. They brought up Zach Gallen. They brought up Luis Castillo. Again, these are guys that we're talking about that could possibly be on the market. We're not talking about that this has been official by anybody that has been talking about. There was one rumor about Castillo possibly being on the block. There hasn't been nothing official or any talks, including Gallen. We're talking pipe dream scenarios where these guys could be available. Right now, we know who's available. Burnes and a bunch of other 3 and 4s. That's what's available right now, as we know of right now. What can be got from the Mets could be signed by the Mets are those guys. That is available right now. We brought up Castillo about a week ago, and there was no reports. There was a report the other day about that, but again, it's shaky. There's more realistic possibility of the Pittsburgh rumor being legit than the Castillo rumor being legit, right? And again, we're not getting Jones if we're not willing to give up. Depending on what the package was, I think Jones would cost more than Crochet, in my opinion. Right? Keller is not.
Yeah, maybe.
Right? Keller's not rocking the boat here for Pittsburgh. Right? You get him. You're gonna have to give up something. And is that worth it at that point? No. Right? Sign Burnes. It's very easy. You can sign Burnes and sign any other 3 or 4s that are out there. One more though. You sign Burnes, you can give me Pivetta, you can give me Manaea, you can give me Buehler, you can give me Flaherty. Pick your poison. When you get Burnes, that other sign-in is like, okay, do what you got to do. And I'd love for it to be Manaea, but if you get Burnes, I find it hard to believe they're going to get Manaea. So,
speaking of, Rosenthal had a report out there saying that the owner of the Red Sox is reluctant to give starting pitchers a long-term deal, any starting pitcher a long-term deal.
But weren't they given 7 years to Max Fried? So how's that report true then?
I don't know. That's what I mean, maybe anybody that's left on the market. I have no idea. That's a little bit contradictory. I agree.
Yeah, it's a little weird. And again, the Burnes issue with Boston, right? They're probably out of that Burnes situation now. but it's still the Giants, I think, are the team that's out there. And again, look,
Yeah.
It's been very quiet on the Mets front with Burnes, and maybe that's a good thing. Maybe the Mets are in on Burnes, or they're keeping it quiet, which is fine. I don't care if they don't need to leak anything to make me happy. Like, do what you got to do behind closed doors, and do what you got to do. But yeah, I see, man. I want Burnes here, man. I really do. Like, it's the obvious choice. It's the easiest way to get your ace. Right? You don't have to trade no prospects. For all the prospect huggers, you don't need to worry about that, right? Let's hold them until they're 30 years old. Why not, right? We might win a AAA championship. All right, let's go.
Dude, I'm so in the camp at this point with so many Mets fans telling me that the Mets aren't in on Burnes. They're not going to get Burnes. I'm so confident. Like I'm becoming increasingly more confident that the Mets are just going to pull a big FU and go out and get this guy. I mean, I really am, especially as this market continues to progress. That's a little bit of a hot take for me, but I honestly, like, I'm probably a lot more confident than in the Mets, at least doing their due diligence and going out and trying to get Burnes, whatever the deal may look like, and just taking him away and just pitching him to the fact that we have Juan Soto now, and that he could be that guy on a championship winning team in this rotation if he comes over. It could be a pipe dream too. I could just be, again, this is just an intuition. This is nothing factual. We haven't heard anything surrounding the Burnes sweepstakes. But if the Red Sox are out, if you have to turn and compete with the Giants for Corbin Burnes and just bank on the fact that Burnes doesn't want to go to Toronto, I don't know. Maybe I'm overlooking it, but it's a lot more of an option, I would say, than a lot of people are giving credit to, I guess that's how I'd put it. Let's talk Scott Boras and Pete Alonso and any other Boras clients. Quote unquote, Pete Alonso is open to listening to a lot of teams and has been doing so. His experiences with the Mets were extraordinary, both for them and him. What do you think, Boras, and any other of the comments that he said about his clients in relation to the New York Mets?
The Mets are going to get the final call. So the Mets can sit on their hands and not worry about Pete Alonso until they get the final call to match or go above. That's it. So Alonso is irrelevant to me because the Mets are going to get the final call. This is not a bidding war for Pete Alonso with the Mets. The Mets will get the final call, and it's up to the Mets to either, Boras can say match it and he's a Met, or you have to go higher. That's what it's going to come down to. And again, until we know what is offered for Pete Alonso, the conversation is kind of Boras is up in his clients. I have no problem with that. Pete, I hope he gets $200 million. I hope he does. Right. I kind of believe that the Mets won't do that, but the Mets will get the final call. So, this isn't a situation like, I don't even think Soto was more unique than Pete Alonso. I think Pete Alonso was obvious, right? We were never sure if Soto would go back to the Mets to get another offer, right? We think everybody believed that if the Yankees were close enough, he was just going to go back to the Yankees regardless of the Mets' highest offer. So in this case, the Mets are getting the final call and the final say. So when Pete Alonso gets offers, then we can really discuss the pricing and if the Mets would do it or not. Right now, I believe the Mets will bring him back. But again, as we've seen all postseason, everybody has been getting a lot more than people expected. So expect Pete Alonso to get a lot more than people expected. And he might be the highest paid baseball player, first baseman in baseball, which is just his time because of the moment in time that the money is just crazy right now. And everybody's have been getting overpaid. Even people that deserve the money probably are still getting overpaid. Pete Alonso is going to get overpaid. If we all, you love him or not, or you're in between, until we get the offers, there's really not much to talk about because the Mets are going to get the final say, Chris.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I mean, it would just be dumb for, him not to go ahead and do that. You know what I mean? It would be just absolutely foolish in terms of maximizing a contract potential not to do that. And I also do. I've been on record saying that, Alonso's market is probably centralized, so we can probably hone in on a couple of different teams that could be in on Pete Alonso and provide competition to, the New York Mets for those sweepstakes. But none of those teams would be giving him a longer or a more valued contract than the New York Mets. Outside of an off chance that the Red Sox are able to trade Cassis and they're automatically in on Pete Alonso. That's the only scenario of any team. Maybe the Cubs. Maybe. That's it.
Well, here's the thing with the Cubs, right? If the Yankees lose out on Tucker, right, and Tucker goes to the Cubs, Bellinger is probably definitely going to the Yankees, right? So that kind of takes I think that kind of takes the Cubs out of the Pete Alonso situation, in my opinion, because I don't see them. I mean, maybe not, right? But people who are talking about Seattle and the Mets with Castillo, you're opening up their money and their payroll for a direct run to overpay for Pete Alonso drastically, who really need a bat, right? This is the whole reason why we're talking about Seattle, because they're looking for a bat, but they can't get that bat and spend money unless they shed payroll, which is the obvious why they might have to trade a pitcher that's making money. And Castillo seems like that guy. You could be opening up the scenario where the Mets get Castillo, trade for him, open up a ton of payroll for Seattle, and end up getting Pete Alonso. That can be a scenario where the Mets put themselves. I mean, look, again, the Mets will still get the final call. But again, I'm still hesitant to think that the Mets are going to give Pete Alonso $200 million if it goes to that point, which I think it's going to. It's going to be the Cubs, the Mariners, some other team we might not even be thinking of, right? Oh, man, I tell you, man, it's going to be so interesting. But the Mets are going to get the final call. So you will see how much the Mets really want Pete Alonso when they get that call to match or go above that offer. That's going to be a telling point for Mets fans if this new core of executives and Stearns and, if all is even here, Stearns and Cohen want Pete Alonso back. Now, Cohen might step in here and just say, I want Pete Alonso back, and doesn't care about the money. Like, that could definitely happen. But if you're relying on Stearns here, the way he's been going about money-wise, when it comes to, it seems like he's, holding on to that pocketbook a little bit too tight. You really think Stearns is going to go above and beyond to get Pete Alonso? I don't believe that. Again, if Cohen steps in, Pete Alonso is going to be a Met at any cost. If that's not the case and Stearns is controlling this, oh boy, Met fans, you're going to really see how much Stearns probably doesn't want to go to that number. And maybe the number's not, the total contract is not the issue. Maybe the years, right? And I think that could be the turning point. Let me make that clear. That's on me. I don't think the money is the issue. I think it's the years. And if there's a desperate team, because there's always a desperate team, right? The Yankees were desperate, overpaid for Fried. Clearly, the Red Sox overpaid for Crochet prospect-wise. We all can agree with that, right? It's been overpay central this offseason. So if you get somebody to give an 8+ year deal like Pete Alonso, I know that sounds nuts, but it's very possible. What do you do? I'm still leaning towards Cohen's going to step in at this point. And again, lock Stearns in a room at this point when that happens, because he clearly locked him in a room when he was with the Soto negotiations. I don't know, Chris. What do you think? If it comes down to Stearns making a decision and Cohen says, I trust you to do what you need to do with right? Soto might have been Cohen's only baby at this point. At this point, it kind of is, right? He hasn't stepped in for Burnes yet, which who knows? And Pete Alonso's market's kind of developing slowly. I believe Coleman's going to step in at this point, and I think it's irrelevant. But if Stearns is leading this charge with the negotiations, and Seattle comes back 8 for 200, Now, I know you said this last time that you think they would do it, but the years are the issue, in my opinion. Stearns don't like these long-term contracts.
8 for 200. I mean, 8 for 200. Let's just do the math real quick. 25 million a year. I mean, that's
okay. So 8 for 225, because then it's going to get to that closer to 30 million mark.
Yeah, that's different. That's a lot different. I think the 7 years is a sweet spot for Pete Alonso, really.
Well, maybe not for Cohen, and that's why I'm saying Cohen might jump in and just say the hell with it. And again, this would annoy me more that Cohen steps in and says, "All right, 8 years, 225. Let's just get Pete Alonso." But you're not stepping in for Corbin Burnes. God damn it! You know what I'm saying? That would annoy me.
What do you think about this? What about the Nolan Arenado? I know you're probably asleep yesterday when the news broke that Arenado listed the Mets as one of his teams that he would waive a no trade clause to. I mean, in the event that you strike out for Pete Alonso, in the world that you're saying, let's just do the math real quick on Nolan Arenado. I mean, clubhouse aside, because we all know the, I guess, problem that happened in St. Louis with Nolan Arenado is that he didn't like some of the young guys controlling that clubhouse, and he wanted the Cardinals to get some veteran presence. And again, I don't know Nolan Arenado. I'm not a fan of the Cardinals. Don't watch the Cardinals too much. Again, don't know him on a personal level, so I can't speak to anything about him. But I understand that a lot of people have concerns about his performance on the field regressing. I still think he has a lot more left in the tank. He's owed $74 million over the course of the next 3 seasons. That's about just under $25 million per year. And it wouldn't take that much to take him on via prospect capital. It wouldn't take anything at all if you take most of that money on from the Cardinals. So I understand that a lot of people don't want anything to do with Nolan Arenado, and that's understandable for a variety of reasons. But let's say the Mets strike out on Pete Alonso, and let's say they don't get Christian Walker and he goes elsewhere, right? Whether it's the Yankees or whether it's Nationals or whatever. I mean, what's the pivot point? Yandy Diaz, I brought into the equation as being a potential trade candidate. It looks like Stearns has a solidified relationship with the Rays organization. I mean, that's probably not enough, though, especially if you want to build the best lineup that you possibly can. If you strike out on Pete Alonso and you don't bring him back, Yandy Diaz is serviceable, but again, he's not that threat in the middle of the order that you'd want to pair with Juan Soto, right? So you'd have to get Yandy Diaz and probably do one more thing in terms of a move. And again, this is where I don't rule out Vientos moving to the DH spot, or at worst case scenario, him moving over to first base. Again, I have my reservations. I do have my reservations about it. Like, I will be honest, I have my reservations about it because I do think Pete Alonso is coming back to the Mets in one way or another, depending on the contract values. And that's, again, we just had that conversation. But would you take a chance at Nolan Arenado? I guess is my question in simplest terms.
I wouldn't do it over Pete Alonso. But if you're making a scenario of Pete Alonso goes elsewhere, you kind of have to think about it, right? You know, you're going to have to, right? Again, there's a no trade clause here. So we know the teams that he's willing to go to. So this can slow the process down. And you don't think, I mean, maybe you would think Arenado, I mean, the Cardinals are not going to wait for Pete Alonso to sign because it's kind of irrelevant to them, right? They're trying to shed the payroll. The first team that probably does that, you know, probably will get him. So, you know, and this is where the Mets are kind of putting themselves in a corner here and not giving them much room for error, right? What do? Do you wait for Pete Alonso's slow developing market and wait around for this? Or do you this seems like a Stearns way of doing things here. Like, you can get Arenado, put Vientos at DH, and that's the cheaper route. Right? If we're all going on.
Well, you still need a first baseman in that scenario. Don't forget about that.
Well, I was saying Vientos go to first and Arenado goes to third.
Okay. I thought you said DH.
No, yeah. So, I mean, I think that's what he would do. I mean, that would probably be the point. So, I mean,
I agree with this. You get both. You get Pete Alonso and Nolan Arenado. And again, worst case scenario, you move Vientos to DH. If you have all three of those guys in your lineup, I'm signing up for that 100%.
You're not getting Arenado for being a major bat in this lineup. He can, be solid and maybe have a better year with more people around him, because there was nothing around him in St. Louis. So, we can look at his numbers by breaking down and stuff like that. He had no help at all. So, I'm not saying he's going to hit 30 home runs or, hit 90 RBIs. But again, he had 70 RBIs and he missed like 25 games. So if you do the math there, if he plays in all of 10 games, 15 games, he's probably closer to 90 than we actually think. And again, you're not looking at home runs for Arenado at this point, especially if you bring back Pete Alonso. You got Vientos, you got Alvarez, you got Soto, you got Lindor, you got Nimmo, 20-plus home run guns at the very least. So you're not looking for Arenado to be the big offensive pop that everybody's seen him as many, many years. You're getting him for 100% defense, probably do a little bit more with the bat with a better lineup, and you kind of make your team better. You put Pete Alonso at first, you DH Vientos, you keep that bat obviously in the lineup with Vientos. Pete Alonso's at first, and Arenado, that would be perfect. That would be pretty good. That would be damn good. But you're talking about Arenado batting like 7th in this lineup. Like,
I don't know about 7th.
Well,
maybe
yeah,
6th. Maybe 6th. What do you think? Who's going to be the 6th bat?
Probably Alvarez.
Okay. I mean, I can get behind that.
Arenado, then you would go, let's see, McNeil 8th, and then Siri 9th, right? Or even if Acuna, you would think Acuna would be 9th, McNeil 8th, or whatever way you want to go. Or I'm sorry, Siri 8th. So there's a lot of different ways to go about that. So yeah. I don't know, man. I feel like that would be pretty good. I think you could do that. Right? It's not going to cost you a lot. Yeah, you got to add some money. But again, if they're adding money to the payroll, wouldn't Alonso Burnes just make more sense and make it so much more easier to do everything you needed and fill those holes a little bit easier without moving people around?
I think the consensus of this entire stream, as we're going past 2 hours at this point, 2 hours and 5 minutes, is that there's still so many different routes the Mets can take. And that's the beautiful thing about it. Again, I know that a lot of people are disappointed. I know, Rob, you're disappointed. But this isn't the end for the New York Mets. This is not the end of this offseason. This is not the final moves we're going to see. It's not just Juan Soto and then boom, we're done. Trust that. Mm-hmm. And this is where, and this is the final thought that I'll leave with. David Stearns is going to have to overpay for a pitcher no matter what. Like, I think fans have this unrealistic expectation of, okay, Manaea is going to be an overpay, so he's going to pass. Pivetta is going to be an overpay, so he's going to pass. Then we're going to transition to Luis Castillo. Okay, he's not going to give the prospect, so he's going to pass. One of these, they have to add pitchers. They have to add at least 2 more pitchers in my estimation. They're going to overpay for a pitcher by overpaying standards, like whatever the standards of what you think overpaying is versus what the market should be for that player. He's going to overpay. Like, at some point, you can be the best GM in the world, have the best mind in the world from baseball perspective, and still get trapped into the market, which it seems like is what the Mets have. This is the situation that they're in. So I think that's really the bottom line, and that's okay, because at the end of the day, you can't keep accounting for excuses to not get XYZ player. You just can't do it. You can't keep making those excuses. And that's the final thought that I will leave everybody with. So, Rob, your final thoughts, and we'll end the stream here.
Okay. And you just brought up guys, right? If they're willing, if you're going to overpay for a couple of two number 3s that are probably going to cost you around $45 to $50 million, right? Which you would think, right? If Manaea is going to get 25, Buehler is going to get 23, that's almost at $50 million. You can actually get Burnes, Manaea, Burnes, Buehler for basically the same amount. So there's no difference. And this is the stupid thing about their process. If they don't get Burnes, you're willing to spend $50 million, $48 to $50 million for Buehler, Manaea, that probably are number 3s, 2s at best, probably Manaea, 2 at best, possibly Buehler. But Buehler and Burnes and either Buehler or Manaea is going to cost you the same thing overall if you really put the numbers together in AAV. So, that's the annoying part. Now, maybe it's just the years with Burnes that's probably concerning, not the money. But again, you're looking for 4 to 5 years of great Burnes as an ace. That is your window with Lindor, Alonso, Nimmo, and yeah, Soto's going to be here for the next century. But you're looking to win over these next 3 to 5 years. Can we all agree with that? We're really your core that you already paid contracts to, and possibly Alonso as well, is a 3 to 5 year window of their prime. That's where you're looking to really focus in on championships. I'm not saying year 6 through 10 is not looking for championships, but this is the real window right here. You made the NLCS game 6. You have an opportunity over the next couple of years to get the best years of Lindor, Nimmo, Alonso. This is where you got to work to get it done now. And then you have enough young players to take that mantle once some other guys get older. But this is the time to do it. I don't see the difference in Manaea, Buehler, Burnes, or either one of the other guys I just mentioned. It's basically the same total AAV combined. So what are we doing here? That's the question we have to ask. And I hope Stearns shuts me up. Please, God, let him shut me up. Because we're looking at plan C at this point. Soto is not enough. We all can agree. Soto Alonso is solid. Probably plan B. But Burnes, not in that mix, is just half-ass in a rotation because you spent money on 2 bats that are great. Awesome. Makes a hell of a lot better. But why do we need to score 7 runs per game to win when we can score 5 runs per game when the rotation could be better? That's my final thoughts, buddy.
All right. I think this was a necessary stream to have because Mets fans are sort of in this middle period of Juan Soto. We're still trying to grasp the Juan Soto signing and how monumental this is for the Mets organization, while also realizing on the flip side that there's a lot of other holes that this team has. And again, I'm not going to question the intelligence of our front office. They know this more than even we do, right? I mean, they look at this team, they look at the numbers every single day. So, I just think it's hard for me to buy into this panicking aspect and mode when we spent this entire offseason so far, especially the latter half of 2024, saying trust Stearns, trust this front office, and where they're able to take us in 2024 with, let's be honest, not the best roster. And now that they're in a go for it mode, like we are hearing from the reports, I think that it is just too early to try to question this front office, but we'll see how it plays out. The other fact of the matter is that, options are coming off the table left and right via trade and free agency. So I do think the Mets have to act a little bit quicker than they have been, but we'll see what they are going to do. Again, if there's any live news, if there's any breaking news as it pertains to the Mets and a signing or a trade, we will be live. But this was the Mets hot stove. We got one breaking news, report from Jonathan Loáisiga going back to the Yankees. We know the Mets were interested there. He is not a New York Met. He's going back to the Bronx. And the Mets are still in search of bullpen and starting rotation help. So with that, I appreciate it. Make sure to thumbs up the video. If you enjoy the content, thumbs up on both Rob's stream and my stream. Subscribe to both of our channels as well. We will coordinate together when we can do another Mets Hot Stove Live together, whether it's tomorrow or Friday or whenever. And just be on the lookout. Hit the notifications button. A lot of videos. I'll try to post a video probably sometime tomorrow at the very minimum, and to continue to have these discussions that are necessary surrounding the New York Mets. They are not done by a long shot. I don't believe that at all. So if I had to say one thing, lastly, keep the patience, Mets fans. Your boy CP, that's Rob. This is the Mets hot stove from the both of us. Let's go Mets, Mets fans. It's going to be a long off season.
Burn, baby, burn.
Peace.
On the Africa room, no seed biting, never bites. Fast water swimming in the girls down in the guys. Spin on the seat, black, you right, red, white. Omen G, Mac 4, Robin C, Gallon Neck Night. Hot stove talk, Robin C, bringing the high. EC's alive, plus trust under those in my city life. White, Queens.